Hey everybody, Isaiah Colton here. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. And in this video, I'm going to be walking you through a step-by-step process on how to scale your business to 8 and 9 figures using what's called our 8 stages of business growth. And before I get into stage number 2, and if you haven't seen stage 1, you can go check that out in another video. Before I get into stage number 2, I want to make sure that you have context to where these 8 stages come from. You see, our business model and our coaching is run around what we call the business flywheel. And the business flywheel has 3 core components to it. The first component is what's called reach. And that's where you want to develop a really amazing marketing strategy to reach your ideal client profile. The second part is engage. And that's where you engage that ideal client, where they get to know you, and then eventually that you earn their business. And the third stage is what we call nurture. And that's where you actually nurture that relationship. They become a raving fan, and now it moves on to the next stage, which is they become an advocate and part of your sales force. In most businesses in real estate or the home services industry, they might have really good marketing, but their sales struggles. Or they might have a really good sales process, but their service struggles. Or they might be really service oriented, but they struggle with their marketing and sales, and they don't have enough clients, and so they're stuck at one stage to the next. And what happens with this flywheel business model, as you get better at removing the friction from each part of your flywheel business model, you actually are able to elevate through the stages faster, more efficiently, and more profitably. And what makes our coaching and consulting different than any other coaching and consulting is we actually layer a proven business model in with AI. So at the end of everything that we teach you, we actually show you how to accelerate the whole process using AI. Now, if you haven't done so before, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss out on one video on these 8 stages. Okay, so before we get to stage 2, a quick recap on stage 1. Stage 1 is where you're first starting business and you're first trying to figure out what to do and how do you get to 100K, a sustainable living, something where you can actually go full-time or be full-time and not be sweating whether you can pay your bills. That's usually what happens in stage 1. And I never forget stage 1 for myself, actually. My wife and I, we came from a previous career in sales and marketing, and my wife was staying home with our kid because we just had a kid, and I asked her if I could go full-time in real estate, and she kind of had a freak out moment. She says, well, this isn't really the best opportunity. This really isn't the best opportunity to do this. Are you crazy? She kind of gave me that look, and we had several conversations, and finally she's like, you know what, it seems like you have a good plan, give it a go, but what I'd ask you in 6 months to a year, if you can't figure out how to make a full-time income for a family, that you go back and consider getting a job. And so I remember stage 1 so clearly because I had a limited amount of time, I had a limited budget, and I had to make it work. You probably can relate to this if you're ever in stage 1, or maybe you're in stage 1 now. You have a limited amount of time, you're wearing a lot of hats, you have to try to figure out how to make your real estate business work or your home service-based business work, and time is of the essence. And so the most important thing is a recap in stage 1 of what helped me get out of stage 1 into stage 2 really, really fast. I was actually able to get out of it in 3 to 6 months and go into stage 2, which stage 2 will make a lot of sense after I share with you. But just as a recap, there's a couple critical skills you have to focus on in stage 1, and feel free to go watch the video for the full breakdown. But the key skills are focus, time management, sales and persuasion, and making sure that you have a really good marketing plan you're following consistently, I should say. You have to be consistent. And you have to make the transition between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And sometimes you toggle back and forth, but you have to train yourself to stay in a growth mindset, which is absolutely huge. We break that down in the previous video. What lead generation and prospecting strategies am I going to use to generate revenue consistently? You see, if you don't have the answer to that question, there's no possible way to get to stage 2, and most likely you're going to get knocked out of the business because if you don't have enough leads, there's no way you're going to have enough sales. Okay, so let's move on to stage 2. Congratulations, you've made it to 100K, and now your goal is to get to 500K in GCI, or what other industries know as revenue, 500K in revenue. The reason why this is so important because after your bills, your take home starts to become decent, where it's somewhere between $25 to $50, depending on how much money you're putting back in the business per hour that you're able to take home. And for some, it might be more aggressive take home, but depending on your needs, some it might be less aggressive. My mindset is that we made a 3 to 5 year sacrifice to take home as little as possible so we can keep as much in the business to continue to accelerate. That is a personal preference and personal choice. But most likely, the more take home that you take in this phase of your business, the less money there is for growth in the actual business. So it's an important decision to really think about. The other thing that starts happening between 100K and 500K is something we call burnout. So a lot of you have worked and you've muscled your way there. There's been willpower. You're learning tons of skills. And now you've had success. You start making commissions. And what happens though is there's the juggling act where you're doing all of the marketing still, you're doing all the sales still, you're doing all the service still. And you feel like even if you had eight of you, you can't get it all done in a day. And that's where that feeling of burnout comes. And you start questioning, is this for you? What did I get myself into? How much longer can I go through this? And I remember what this was like for me very, very clearly. I remember one day I actually was in the office and there was a big deal blew up. There was a $40,000 commission on the table. It was one of the biggest commissions that the brokerage was ever going to bring in on a very big deal. And we're counting on this to keep the cash flow coming into the business to go to the next level and to make sure that everybody was healthy and paid. And then the deal blew up. And we tried to do everything we could to save the deal. And I didn't know what we were going to do. And I was having a freak out moment in my mind because there was already so much going on. And we were going to use some of that money, myself, my two partners at the time, as we were growing the brokerage, we were going to use that money to invest into our first hire, which was going to be an administrative assistant and or a marketing assistant. And then the deal blew up. And I remember just walking out the door, just literally ready to quit. And I went into my car and I sat in my car and I blasted the music and I was just screaming at the top of my lungs because I was so just devastated, pissed off. And like I was going to have to tell my wife that we were going to have to stay in our apartment for probably another 6 months to a year because we had moved out of a really, really nice house in the suburbs, and we were staying in an apartment because we were using the money from the rental property of our suburbs to help fund the business. And I was not looking forward to that conversation at all. And I almost just said, and it was then my business partner came out and he was having a conversation with me. And he just kind of said, hey, dude, like we've made it this far. We're going to figure it out. And he had been in the business much longer than I was. And even though he was playing us, he was the listing agent. I was playing more of an operational role at this point, and we would go out on appointments sometimes. But one of the things that he shared with me that I thought was really, really powerful, he said, in 20 years, is this going to matter? In 10 years, is this going to matter? In 5 years, is this going to matter? And I never forget when John Lascaux had that conversation with me. It really kind of helped me put things back into perspective. And at that time, we were working out of a converted basement to a house that was turned into offices. And he just said, hey, let's hang out afterwards. Let's hang out after work. And we're not supposed to smoke in the basement, but he lit up a cigar anyway against the landlord's rules. And he said, here, have a cigar. And I didn't smoke cigars at that time, but I'm like, you know what? Screw it. And I had a cigar. Let's do it. And we just started talking. We started talking through a game plan and what our next phase was going to look like. And most likely, you're going to have similar experiences, either in stage 1 or stage 2, where there's going to be a lot of stuff that go wrong. And this is really, in stage 2, an important muscle to develop is going from not only being in a growth mindset, but a level of mental toughness where you develop kind of this layer of Teflon that, like, no matter what is going to happen, what's going to come your way, you're going to overcome the odds. It's failure is not an option, because what's going to happen in stage 2 is you're going to start going through some different challenges, which I'm going to talk to you in a minute. And some of those challenges have to do with delegation and making sure that you're able to start, that you have a budget where you can go out and you can have enough money for your first hire, because that burnout can become a real thing. And for some people, can knock them out of the box or cause them to stagnate in productivity. And neither is the ideal choice. And so what we did after kind of talking through that, what we did is we made a decision that we were going to have 2 to 3 months saved in our bank account where each partner could pay their bills. Myself, Mark, and John at the time, each partner could pay their bills, and we could afford to float that hire for 3 months without trouble. And so we worked, and we saved up about 3 months of our total bills, of total company bills in the bank account. And then we took on that first hire. And that's a critical point with your budgeting, because you need to make sure that you're actually create a little bit of a cushion, so that way, because you have other employees that you're responsible for now. You're responsible for their livelihood, their income, and they have a job to do, and they have to do their job, but you're responsible for that. And it is an important decision to make. So I recommend 2 to 3 months of savings in the business bank account, and then you make a decision to bring on that hire. So let's talk about who that hire should be. Now, it's going to be a little bit different for everybody, but for a lot of you in stage 2, if you can find a hire that not only has some marketing skills, but really good technical and administrative skills, it's what I call a unicorn. And that unicorn hire, if you can find it, can be a game changer. And you might pay them a little bit more than maybe you would pay a regular executive assistant. But it's worth it, because essentially they're going to be doing 3 jobs. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be working 90 hours a week. It just means you might not have a full-time admin job that you need. You might not need a full-time marketing assistant. You might not need a full-time operations person, but you need somebody that can help you with maybe 10 hours with this or 20 hours with this, but it would still shake out to about 40 hours. And so I got really lucky with my first hire. His name was Chris. And Chris actually was kind of able to do a lot of different things. He was able to do some basic marketing stuff. He was able to do some technical stuff, and he was able to do some administrative stuff. And what was really interesting, and I want you to think outside of the box, is I could not afford to pay him what he was worth. I actually couldn't even come close to it. And so what I did is I made a choice to give up some equity within our business in order to have him come on. Now, that's a big choice. And we had a framework around it. So if he was to ever leave prematurely or it didn't work out, that the equity would come back to the company. So there's protection for him and for the company. But it turned out to be, I can confidently say we would have not have gotten through stage 2 into going to stage 3, which we're going to talk about in our next video, as fast as we did, if it wasn't for him coming on board. And so that first hire is really, really critical. And in the next video, we're going to talk about a lot about how to figure out who your first hire is, and more importantly, what to delegate first. But ideally, that should be your first hire. Now, for those of you that are having a conversation in your mind right now saying, I don't feel comfortable delegating because people can't do it as good as I can. Well, that's the first mistake right there. Number one, you should look for somebody that has skills that you don't have that complement your skills. You see, my skill set was prospecting. My skill set was sales. My skill set was team building. And so because I had that skill set, and then also my partner's skill set was going out to the appointment and meeting with people face to face, building relationships, and doing a really, really good job of landing listings. So we complemented our skill sets. But what we didn't have is we didn't have a good operations person. We didn't have a good technical person. And we didn't have somebody, I had a marketing mind, but I wasn't good with the technical parts of the marketing. And so I needed somebody that was good with that, somebody that could see those ideas come to reality. And so that's where that first hire came from. Now, maybe you have a different set of skills. Maybe you're not quite as good at the prospecting, but you're better at marketing. You might hire somebody that can help you prospect. Maybe you're in a position where you have really strong technical skills, but your marketing mind isn't as strong. You might hire somebody that has those skill sets that maybe complement yours. So it's going to look different for everybody. And one of the things I can't stand in this industry, people say this should be your first hire. Now, it's not to say that that's wrong information, but it's what skill sets the first hire has to complement your skill sets. And I tell you what, that will take you far. And guess what? If that hire is done the right way, then most likely you won't worry about delegating something to them because you won't be having the conversation in your mind, they can't do it as good as me. because that's not the right hire then, right? You didn't hire the right person then if you have to have that conversation. And so I actually have my marketing coordinator here who's helping me shoot this video. Is probably reminiscing with this right now as we speak, because we've all made those hires that we thought it was the right hire, and we figured out, wait a second, I'm doing a lot of the work for them. Now, there might be a period of time that they have a learning curve, and that's okay. But after about 3 months, if they can't figure it out on their own, it's probably not the right hire, and it's time to move on. Now, if this happens to you in stage 2, another common mistake is you hire the wrong person, or just it's not a good fit, or maybe they end up moving on, and then you have one of those things where you have a little collateral damage, or maybe there's a bad taste in your mouth, and now you're concerned about hiring somebody else. And you want to go back to just having it just be you and doing it all yourself again. That's the worst mistake that you can make, because guess what? That happens to everybody. Let's be real about it. Have you moved on from another company, right? Have you maybe went to a company and found it wasn't a good fit and moved on? It happens to everybody. So the answer is not to not hire anybody. It's just to keep going and finding the right person. The analogy I'd like to give you is, just because you had a bad client doesn't mean you're not going to go out and find more clients, right? So it's the same process. And we have a ton of war stories that we could tell you along those lines of learning this the hard way. But it is magical when you find the right person, and it's just a breath of fresh air when you find the right person. So that's a big thing that you really, really want to think about with your first hire. So to wrap up stage 2, there's a couple things that you really, really want to think about. The first one is delegation. The next one is managing your database. I didn't talk too much about this video, but if you don't have a really good CRM and you don't really have a good systematic process to operate that CRM, then adding somebody else to CRM is going to stack up crap on crap. It's going to take a bad foundation, and people are going to be interacting with a bad foundation. So that's really, really, really important. And then also your budget, and then also making sure you start thinking about tracking your metrics, because if you're bringing other team members on, they have to have some sort of accountability, metrics that they're accountability to. And this will really, really help you build a good foundation for stage 2. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, if you have not done so already, make sure you like and subscribe. And I can't wait till next week to talk to you about stage number 3.